Ciao, come stai oggi? Tutto bene? Benissimo. Today's lesson is going to be on articulated prepositions. So in Italian, they're called le preposizioni articolate. And so the combination is going to be between the simple prepositions, only 5 of them, and I'll go over those in a minute, and the definite article. So if you haven't studied a lot of the simple prepositions or the definite article, you need to go to YouTube because I have 2 videos on both of those, one on simple prepositions, one on the definite article. Those are going to be fundamental in creating these articulated prepositions. Va bene? I'd like to start off by saying that I think that prepositions are one of the hardest things about Italian, and the articulated prepositions as well. It just adds another layer of things to think about when you're putting together sentences. And the tricky thing about the articulated prepositions is that sometimes the prepositions will articulate and sometimes they won't. And so there's lots of exceptions, and you'll find there's no way to know all of the rules and all of the instances where they do or they don't, because I'm going to give you some examples of certain instances where they do and then they don't and why. But as you continue to study Italian, you'll see that you'll continue to learn more and uncover more of these exceptions that I didn't give you the information about today, because there are a lot of them, okay? So just come into this with an open mind, relaxed, and just realize that you're on this language learning journey, right? You're not learning everything today. You're going to continue learning over the years, okay? And if you continue to study, you'll just continue to improve. Va bene? So on that note, let's get started. Cominciamo. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the definite articles, a review of the definite articles, because like I said, those are fundamental to creating these articulated prepositions. So you remember that there are 8 definite articles, 8 different ways to say the in Italian. 2 of them are the same. L' comes before a masculine singular noun. It also comes before a feminine singular noun. So we could technically say there are 7 definite articles because those 2 are the same. So let's remember why we use the article with certain nouns, okay? So the first one, let's start with the masculine singular definite articles. So il comes before most consonants, right? So if we want to say the boy or the kid, we say il ragazzo, sì? And then lo is a second singular masculine article. It comes before nouns that start with a Z or an S plus a consonant, or combinations like PS or GN. So if we want to say the male student, we would say lo studente. Va bene? And then, like I said, L' comes before all masculine singular nouns that start with a vowel. So the word for tree is masculine. So if we want to say the tree, l'albero, va bene? And then when you make those articles plural, they become, il becomes I. So il ragazzo, the boy, I ragazzi are the boys, or the boys and girls. That could be a plural group too of boys and girls. And then lo becomes li in the plural. So the students are gli studenti. Gli studenti could be a group of all male students, or it could be a group, again, a combination of girls and guys. Va bene? And then the trees, L' does the same thing as lo, it turns into li. So the trees would be gli alberi, va bene? So those are your 5 masculine definite articles. See? So the feminine articles are a little more simple. There's only 3. So there's 2 choices for singular and then 1 plural. So la comes before all consonants, all feminine singular nouns that start with a consonant. So if we say the chair, it's la sedia. And then L' comes before all singular feminine nouns that start with a vowel. So if we want to say the sunrise, l'alba, l'alba. See? And then if we make both of those plural, there's only one plural and it's le. So la sedia becomes le sedie, chairs, and l'alba becomes le albe, le albe. Va bene? So those are the articles. So now let's talk about the prepositions that we're going to use. So there are many prepositions, okay? The prepositions that only ones that are going to articulate with the definite article that we're going to talk about in this video are a, I'll just use my hand here, a, in, di, da, su. 5. So 5 of them. A, in, di, da, su. We will also talk about con, because that sometimes will articulate. It doesn't have to, but the rest of them aren't going to. So per, for example, for doesn't articulate. So in the document that I provided in this chapter, there's a chart with all of the articulated prepositions, as well as in my book, The ABCs of Italian Travel, there's a chart showing all of the articulations. So I'm not going to go over each of the simple prepositions and their combinations. I'm just going to go over to a and in. And then you can refer to the chart once you know what you're supposed to do to form these new prepositions. Va bene? So let's begin with a and a. We're going to do a and in. A and in, I believe, are the trickiest prepositions because they both can mean the same thing. So they both can mean to, in, or at. And so you have to know the context, and sometimes it's just idiomatic when to use one and when to use the other, and when to articulate and when not to articulate. So with both of these simple prepositions, sometimes you're just going to leave them alone. So you're not going to articulate them at all, okay? So let's start with a. So a plus il becomes al. And al means to the or at the, okay, or in the. And that's the same with all of these articulated prepositions. The is combined into this new word, al, okay? Instead of separating them, it's just for better flow, really, okay? Instead of saying a, il, al, it just sounds better. A plus lo is allo. A plus L apostrophe becomes al with an apostrophe. And then the plurals, a plus e is ai. A plus li becomes ali. Those are the masculine articulated prepositions. For the feminine prepositions, a plus la is alla. A plus L apostrophe is al with an apostrophe, just like the masculine version. And then the plural, alle, alle. And if you have been studying time, you know that 2 of those prepositions, those articulated prepositions, are used when telling time. When you say that something happens at 1, a luna, okay? A luna is an articulated preposition, at 1. And then alle due or alle tre, quattro, that's an articulated preposition, at 2 or 3 or 4, okay? So, parliamo adesso di in, okay? In does something different than most of the prepositions because it totally changes forms when it articulates. So, in plus il becomes nel. In plus lo becomes nello. In plus L apostrophe, nel with an apostrophe. And then for the plurals of those articles, in plus e is nei. In plus li is nelli. And then for the feminine articles, in plus la is nella. In plus L apostrophe, again, it's the same, nel with an apostrophe. And the last one, in plus le, is nelle. So for the rest of the articles I said, I'm not going to go through this step where I show you all of the articulations, but know that for the D meaning of, from, or belonging to, the I turns into an E. So the forms are going to be a variation of that DE. So del, dello, del apostrophe, dei, degli, etc. Okay? And then da doesn't do anything. The A stays the same. So dal, dallo, dal, dai, dagli, etc. Su is the same. The U stays the same. So sul, sullo, sul, sui, sugli, okay? And so on. So there you have it. Those are all of the articulated prepositions. And I'm going to come back to con at the end and tell you about the articulations with con because it's not used a ton in an articulated form. So let me give you an example of each of these articulated prepositions, and then I'll talk about all of the funny exceptions to the rules, okay? So let's take the preposition a. Okay, so usually we use a when we're saying to the, okay? So you're going to use it a lot with andare, like whoever is going to the whatever place, right? So if I want to say she's going to the train station, okay, I would say va alla stazione, va alla stazione, and that alla becomes its own new word, okay? Now let's look at in. Okay, in, I said, can mean at, in, or to. Most commonly it means in. So, un esempio, il latte sta nel frigo. Il latte sta nel frigo. The milk is in the refrigerator. Va bene? Okay, di. Di means of, from, but it also means belonging to, with possession, okay? Allora, l'esempio è le scarpe sono della mia amica. Le scarpe sono della mia amica. The shoes are of my friend. That means they belong to my friend. Della is the articulated preposition there. Si? Va bene. La prossima, da. Okay, so da means from, but it can also mean to. So you've seen this when you've done the simple prepositions. So let's use an example where it means to, because that is the hard one to kind of wrap your head around. So if I want to say, you're going to the dentist, okay, you use da instead of a for to, and you would say, vai dal dentista. Vai dal dentista. Va bene? But it can also mean from. So we're going to come back to that with some other examples. And then the last preposition, su. Le pesche stanno sull'albero. Le pesche stanno sull'albero. The peaches are on the tree. On. So there's the articulation, sul with the apostrophe. Okay? So you see there that it's actually pretty easy, just combining the simple preposition, whatever the meaning is, with the forming the word, and then it makes the sentence flow a little bit better, right? So that part is easy. The tricky part is knowing the exceptions. So now I'm going to start to talk about the exceptions when certain prepositions are not articulated and why. So let's start with the preposition a. So a, like I said, you use it often when you're saying you're going to the whatever, places in the city. Often you're going to use a and in an articulated form. But when you say you're going to the theater, you don't articulate it. So if I want to say we are going to the theater, we leave a alone in its simple form. So we would say andiamo a teatro. Andiamo a teatro. Va bene? And then, as you know, you use a saying if you're going home, if you're going to school, if you're going to work. And it doesn't say, in English, the translation is not to the. You're saying like, I'm going home. So, vado a casa. Vado a casa. The a stays simple in its simple form, right? But then if you say you're going to somebody else's house, you can do two things. You can use a in an articulated form, or you can use da in a simple form. Va bene? So let me show you those examples. So if I want to say, He's going to Giorgio's house, okay? I can say va alla casa di Giorgio. Va alla casa di Giorgio. So remember, when you talk about possession, you say the thing that's possessed and then di and then who possesses it. There's no apostrophe s in Italian. That's how you express possession, with the di. Okay, so to the house of Giorgio, and alla there is in its articulated form, giusto? But I can also say va da Giorgio. Va da Giorgio just means he's going to Giorgio's house, because da can mean also with a place of business or somebody's house, it can mean to, right? Just like the example with the dentista. But when I talked about the dentista, it was articulated. It was dal dentista. If you talk about somebody referring to their name, you don't articulate it. That's why it's just va da Giorgio. Va da Giorgio to Giorgio's house. Va bene? Perfetto. So let's talk about in now. In is a little trickier, because in, often with certain places around town, is always going to stay in its simple form. It's not going to articulate, even though it's meaning to the or at the, okay? So some examples where it stays in its simple form and it doesn't articulate is if you're saying that you're in the or you're going to the chiesa, church, biblioteca, library, ufficio, office, banca, bank, and then centro, the word for downtown, you just say in centro. And then if you talk about in the kitchen, you don't articulate it, you just say in cucina. Va bene? So let me give you some examples for those. So if I say, I'm studying in the library, okay? I'm going to say studio in biblioteca. Studio in biblioteca. And the in does not articulate, it just stays simple, okay? However, if I modify biblioteca in any way, then the in does articulate, okay? So if I want to say, I'm studying in the new library, then I would say, studio nella nuova biblioteca. Studio nella nuova biblioteca, because I modified biblioteca. And that's why I said this stuff is tricky, okay? So the same thing with all of those words that I just gave you, where in stays simple. If you modify them, then they actually will articulate. So, per esempio, if I say they're going to church, okay? We would say vanno in chiesa. Vanno in chiesa, unmodified. But if I say they're going to the medieval church, okay, then we do modify it. And we would say vanno nella chiesa medievale. Vanno nella chiesa medievale. Va bene? Okay. So modified, articulate, unmodified, leave it alone. So another thing about in is when you talk about seasons, you always use in or di. You can use either one. But when we translate it and we want to say in the summer or in the winter or whatever, we say the in English. In Italian, you don't need the. You just leave those two prepositions in the simple form. So if I say in the summer, I can just say in estate, or I can say d'estate, d'estate with the D apostrophe. If I say in the spring, in primavera, or di primavera. You can say either of those, but don't articulate those prepositions to say in the whatever season. Va bene? Okay, so let's continue to talk about a and in. Like I said, they're the most tricky. So a, like you know, you always use it before cities when you're saying that you're in a city or you're going to a city. Per esempio, I'm in Rome. I would say sono a Roma. Okay, sono a Roma stays simple. Or I can ask you guys, are you all going to Venice? Andate a Venezia. Okay, andate a Venezia. But you use in when you're talking about things bigger than a city, like a region or a country, or you're talking about islands, okay? And most of the time, it's going to stay simple. So if I say, you're going to Italy, I would say, vai in Italia, vai in Italia, see? Or if I say, they are in Germany, sono in Germania, sono in Germania. So here's where it changes. First of all, if a country is in a plural form, then you do articulate the in with the article, like gli Stati Uniti, the United States. So if we say, he's going to the United States, that's in plus li becomes negli. So the sentence would be, va negli Stati Uniti. Va negli Stati Uniti. Va bene? Or if we say, we are in the Greek islands, okay? Siamo nelle isole greche. Siamo nelle isole greche, because we're talking about plural, so then we do articulate it. Also, if you're talking about directions within a country, then you also will articulate. For example, if you say the north, okay, we're in the north of Mexico, okay, I would say siamo nel nord Messico. Siamo nel nord Messico. So with da, if you're leaving a country, you are going to articulate da plus the definite article of the country, okay? So if I want to say, and this works for regions as well. So if I want to say the coffee is from Colombia, okay, we are going to articulate da plus la for la Colombia. And it becomes dalla, see? So il caffè è dalla Colombia. Il caffè è dalla Colombia. Or if I want to say the wine comes from Tuscany, the region Tuscany, la Toscana, okay? Again, it's da plus la, it becomes dalla. So il vino viene dalla Toscana. Il vino viene dalla Toscana. Va bene? Okay, good. So those are the rules for referring to, like I said, countries and cities and all that. So let's talk about di. Di can mean of or from or belonging to. Like I said, I gave the example earlier, meaning possession. So let's talk about that possession piece. Let's remember the possessive pronouns. Remember those when we talk about my whatever and your whatever and his or hers whatever. There's all those possessive pronouns. And if you remember, when you use family in the singular, you don't include a definite article when you use a possessive pronoun, unless you use loro. So like if I said my daughter, I would say mia figlia. But if I say my daughters, well, actually I have a son. If I say my kids, I do include an article, I miei figli. See? So family in the singular, you don't need an article. Unless you're saying their, unless you're using the pronoun loro, we would say il loro figlio, la loro figlia. So you always use the article when using loro, and then in the plural as well, I loro figli, le loro figlie. So when you use di, talking about possession, if you're talking about family members, just remember to note if it's singular or plural who you're talking about. And if it's singular, you don't articulate the di because you don't need an article. If it's plural though, you do because the article is necessary. So if I say the book is my sister's, it's my sister's book, okay? My sister is singular. I don't need an article when I say mia sorella. So I would say il libro è di mia sorella. Il libro è di mia sorella. See? But if I say the car is my parents', it's my parents' car. Now, parents, I genitori, is plural, so it is necessary for me to articulate di plus I to form dei. So I would say, la macchina è dei miei genitori. La macchina è dei miei genitori. Va bene? So that difference there between the singular and the plural, it extends now into this articulation with these simple prepositions. See? So another thing about D is that when you use it in its articulated form, it can also be the partitive, which means some. Okay? So D plus all of those articles could mean some of this. Okay? Per esempio, I could say vado al mercato e compro delle mele. Vado al mercato e compro delle mele. I'm going to the market and I'm buying some apples. Okay? So the some is used often with food. You can use it in other forms as well. Okay, so let's talk about now con, finally. So con, like I said, you don't need to articulate it, but you can if you want. And you'll hear sometimes some people using it. So I want you to know these words so when you hear them, cogli, you understand what that means. So let's go through all of those articulated forms of con. So con plus il forms col. Con plus lo, collo. Con plus l'apostrophe, col. And then the plurals, con plus I, coi. Con plus li, cogli. Feminine forms, con plus la, colla. Con plus l'apostrophe, col. And then con plus le, colle. So let me give you two examples, one non-articulated and one in an articulated form. I can say, I'm walking with my dog. Cammino con il mio cane. Cammino con il mio cane. Or I can articulate it and I can say, cammino col mio cane. Cammino col mio cane. Va bene? So either one works. Okay, allora, abbiamo finito. So I know this is a lot of information and a lot of really detailed things, really tricky things. But again, be patient because this is a long process learning about all of these prepositions. They're very difficult, okay? So buono studio e ci vediamo presto. Ciao!